All right, we are live on Twitter. We are coming to you from YouTube. We are here with NFL Week 3 injuries with our injury expert from thelines.com, Will Carroll. Will, it is another busy week on the injury front. And if you guys don't know who Will is or haven't seen his work, he has been doing this for more than 2 decades. He has a new book out called The Science of Football. Will, hold that bad boy up. His 4th book, available everywhere books are sold, Amazon, bricks and mortar stores. You can go and check it out. But this guy has been covering injuries for 2 decades at ESPN, Baseball Prospectus, Football Outsiders, FanDuel. Right now, he's the director of bioanalytics for North Star, a sports science startup company. How are you, my friend? Another busy week on the injury front.
Absolutely. It's been very busy. This is kind of what I warned everybody about last week, that normally we see injuries slow down. The halfway point always was the end of week 1, start of week 2. I don't think that's the case anymore. A lot of people thought it had shifted because of COVID. As I explained last week, as I'm reiterating here, I think it's going to be much later. I think we're going to see a lot of these issues going into week 6. It's the reduction of playing time in the preseason. It's the reduction of active practices and collisions in the preseason. We're just going to see these injuries shift outward. And that's not great for anybody who's trying to get some certainty coming here into week 2.
For sure. And for a full report of Will's thoughts on the week's injuries, you can always find that each week at thelines.com. You can find it on our homepage. You can find it on Will's Twitter feed. You can find it on my Twitter feed. Plenty of different places to find it. He went through 19 different players to look at. But on this show, let's start with some of the bigger names as injury reports come out here on Friday afternoon. And the Indianapolis Colts, Will, in your neck of the woods, have a very, I won't say busy injury report. There's not a long list of names, but the names that are on there are significant. And the one on offense that got everybody's attention is Michael Pittman with a quad injury being downgraded from limited to a DNP in the middle of the week. What are you hearing here on Friday ahead of a game where they are road favorites, 3.5-point road favorites at the Jacksonville Jaguars?
Yeah, this was the worry the entire preseason for the Colts is who did they have besides Pittman? And here we have questions about Pittman going into this week. I think he's going to play. I don't think he's going to be 100%. I worry a little bit about recurrence, but I'm not that worried about him being out. I just worry about what's behind him. Alec Pierce has a concussion. He's out for this week. They've already said that. He's not going to have time to clear the concussion protocol, which is a little interesting. But who's behind him? They've got new tight ends. They've got Nyheim Hines, who's essentially a hybrid pass-catching running back. But I just don't know who the heck Matt Ryan's going to throw it to. They looked horrible in the first half once again, better in the second half, and Matt Ryan certainly seemed to pick things up. But quad injury for a speed player like Pittman, that's a big worry. I would expect Jacksonville to be very, very physical with him, test him early. You can't really target people, but if you've got a guy who has a leg injury, you're not so worried about him running past you. So you'll often know, hey, I can press this guy, and the defensive coordinators will be reminding them. So I am worried about Pittman's production. I'm certainly not taking any overs on the Colts offense, but that was before Pittman's injury. This doesn't help them at all. But I think you'll probably hear him say game time decision, but I think he's going to play.
One that's confusing a lot of people, and we've talked about this player before, it's in your column, but I want to reiterate it here. Shaq Leonard being ruled out despite a full week of practice. Why?
Yeah, he just hasn't recovered. He had back surgery that was supposed to clear up the ankle problem. Yeah, I know that sounds as confusing as it sounds. It's just a mess. And there's been no openness about this. Yes, nerves from your spine go down your legs, but they haven't cleared up what they thought would clear up, what the problem was after the ankle surgery. If you told me he was having back surgery to correct a problem with the nerves in his leg, I would go, okay, but he had surgery on his ankle before. That should be completely cleared up. And that indicates there was an actual physical problem in there. It's not like surgeons go in guessing. A lot of times they don't know exactly what they're going to do when they get in there. They have to see how much the damage is. You can't always see that on an MRI. But this has just been a confusing saga, and everybody I've spoken to regarding this seems as confused. Some of it has happened because he went a little bit outside the normal circle. We've seen that with the Colts medical staff. You can remember Robert Mathis years ago went to his own doctors at his own risk, ended up costing him a suspension. But that's not that unusual. But for a guy like Leonard, who's had a confusing offseason, even changing his name, this one just doesn't all add up yet. The fact that he's still out continues to worry me.
One more Colts question for you because it's a big name. It is their top pass rusher, DeForest Buckner, who missed the first 2 days of practice this week. He's officially listed as questionable after a Friday walkthrough. The Colts didn't practice today. They actually did a walkthrough, but he is listed as questionable, a hip injury. What is your optimism about him being able to play? And if so, his effectiveness as a pass rusher with a hip injury?
He's not a traditional pass rusher. He's not a pure speed player. He's a strength, break down the line, break down the pocket kind of guy. Now, what you mentioned there about them having a walkthrough on Friday, a couple of the beat writers, including Stephen Holder, talked about that they had unusually physical practices Wednesday and Thursday, and then for workload purposes, gave them essentially the day off on Friday, at least for physical contact, just did a walkthrough. That's unusual. Not sure what Frank Reich was doing there, but that's why Buckner, who had a bit of a hip pointer, was sitting those out. They knew the last thing he needed to be was in especially physical practices. A hip pointer is just a bruise on the top of your hip. It's painful, but it's not lingering. There's a lot of things you can do to treat that. So I expect Buckner to play pretty normally, maybe a little more rotation than they're used to with him.
I will tell you a large number of members on our staff at thelines.com has a play on the spread in this game, but I'm going to tell you, you're going to have to go to our Megapod or the Gridiron Gamble podcast on our YouTube channel to see what our opinions are here. You can also check out Eli Hershkovich's week 2 picks over at thelines.com and in the Discord channel. If you're not in our free Discord, hit the button top right corner of the homepage at thelines.com. A lot of great NFL conversation going on in there throughout the week. Let's move on to Sunday Night Football. The Packers, we talked a little bit about last week. We'll see if the offensive linemen Jenkins and Bakhtiari play. Looks like it's trending that way. For a team that laid an egg week 1, they come out and they have basically a double-digit home favorite for week 2. You don't see that very often, but that's what the market thinks of the Chicago Bears. Nevertheless, the Packers need receivers, and Alan Lazard is still a situation for this team. What do you know about Lazard?
Yeah, what we know about Lazard, and this has been kind of confusingly covered, the word was he got stepped on. And when somebody gets stepped on, usually they have cleats kind of getting their foot stomped on, and it hurts, and maybe there's a cut. That's not the case here. He got stepped on his ankle, and it rotated it. So it's essentially an ankle sprain. They were a little worried about the high ankle at the beginning of it. That's not the case. There is damage they could see on ultrasound. So this is essentially just a very strange ankle sprain. Most times you see rolling out, if you've ever played pickup hoops and rolled your ankle, it's almost always out. His went in, different ligaments. They're actually stronger and thicker, but that makes it tougher to heal. So Lazard's still a game time decision, I think. Haven't seen the practice reports. He was scheduled to practice today on Friday. Have not seen whether that happened. Obviously, that'll be a good indicator. But again, I just don't understand. The whole Green Bay line confuses me. I know Chicago is not a great team. I know Chicago, they won in the rain and had that great slip and slide picture. But with Bakhtiari and Jenkins, I just have absolutely no confidence in that line. I mean, Jenkins was out of practice on Wednesday, came back on Thursday. Bakhtiari's knee is problematic. That thing's just swelling up every time he goes out there. Did not practice yesterday. We'll have to see if he's back in there today. But Aaron Rodgers was absolutely discombobulated the whole game. Yeah. Chicago's not incompetent. And I just think that line's way too big, knowing what we know about the offensive line.
Yeah, I think the entire betting market's kind of split on this, to be honest with you. I've heard very smart people like you say that they don't want to lay it with the Packers, and I've heard very smart people also say that they do want to lay it and feel like the line is a little bit short here with the talent deficient Bears roster. So, hey, I guess we'll see. It's certainly more factors that Green Bay is battling against here than we typically see a Green Bay team, at least in terms of health, and obviously the recurring storyline of replacing Devontae Adams. So
the other part I'm curious about here is this might be an indication of how good a coach Matt Eberflus is. Yeah, he was the defensive coordinator in Indianapolis for a couple of years, took over there this year. And I think they performed pretty well in week one, given that dearth of talent, that ongoing rebuild that they're doing. I think this one might be a really good indicator. If they get blown out, I don't know that it tells us he's a bad coach, but if they stick with it, that's going to prick up a lot of ears, I think.
For sure. Let's move on to the next game here. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers on the road at the New Orleans Saints. A lot of injuries to cover in this one to be able to create a proper handicap. Right now, as we record on Friday afternoon, this is now moved off the 3. The Bucs are 2.5-point road dogs like we saw last week with Tampa Bay going into Dallas. I think that's probably a reaction to the Alvin Kamara ribs injuries, but Tampa Bay also has injuries as well. Chris Godwin ruled out, or Todd Bowles said unlikely to play with a hamstring injury. Their offensive lineman, Donovan Smith, their left tackle, might be dealing with a pain tolerance issue. You can read more about that in Will's column, which I just tweeted out. But where do you want to go here? I know you mentioned you want to talk about Godwin. We got the Kamara with the ribs, so take this wherever you want to go.
Let's do both. Kamara with the ribs, I'm not that concerned about. What I'm told is he's going to be wearing a more advanced rib protector, which I don't understand why every player isn't doing that to begin with. We saw players last week that didn't. Mac Jones was the one that I noted, didn't seem to be wearing a rib protector of any kind. I couldn't see all the pictures. You can't see under the jersey, of course. But the fact is, most of these are just flaps that go down from the shoulder pads that cover the kidneys. They're basically the same stuff they've had since the 60s. If you played Pop Warner football in the past 20 years, same sort of stuff. It's foam, it's a little bit of padding, and it's hard plastic. There's some that are made out of Kevlar. I actually had some around here. But that stuff is really, really good.
Stop a bullet, let alone a tackle.
It won't stop a bullet.
I heard Kevlar, but my bad. But I went too far. I'm gonna leave the analysis to you, bud.
Yeah, it's a little thicker. Don't try that. But there is, if you search it out on YouTube, there's a video of me testing this by putting a thin sheet of it on my head and hitting myself in the head with a hammer. The stuff really does work, and they make rib protectors out of that. And you can sit there and they, as a demonstration a couple of years ago at a convention, they were hitting a guy in the side with a sledgehammer. And I think a little of it was crazy, but it made for a heck of a demo. So Kamara's ribs, I'm not that worried about. He wears the unequal, he goes on. Godwin, not going to play. That hamstring after the knee, it doesn't worry me any more than any other hamstring injury. It worries me for, are we going to have more of these compensation injuries? Is he going to hurt the other hamstring? Is he going to hurt a quad? Is he going to roll an ankle? Is he going to end up re-injuring that knee or the other knee because he's changed something in his gait? So I'll be very curious to see how they deal with this. Tampa has a ton of resources, not to mention they do have a really good sharing agreement with Manchester United, the other team the Glazers own, and they have really pioneered work in gait analysis. So I'm curious. I know they're talking, but I think that's going to be a major factor in getting Godwin back. Some other teams might not have that resource.
Fair enough. Cincinnati Bengals at the Dallas Cowboys, and this line has obviously shifted a ton with the Dak Prescott injury. We're looking at 7.5 now with the Bengals as a road favorite going up against Cooper Rush. Cowboys still without their left tackle, Tyron Smith. It's a dumpster fire. Mike McCarthy's out here saying his offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore, needs to be smarter, which is the ultimate NFL pot calling the kettle black, but I digress. T. Higgins is the injury here of interest. Concussion last week, did practice today, is still listed as questionable, so perhaps a little refresher on the concussion protocols here.
Yeah, there's 4 steps to it, and it's supposed to be that you can do 1 a day. It's not that in practice. We've seen guys take 2. They usually have that last doctor visit, the independent neurologist, on Saturday. So he hasn't been completely clear. But the fact that he was on the field early this week tells you things were progressing pretty well. Back to Alec Pierce, same thing. He wasn't going to make it. He'd only made it to step 2, was still having some symptomology. Higgins, I'm told, never had symptoms. And this isn't unusual after a concussion. You can be concussed and then not have headaches, not have light sensitivity, dizziness, nausea, all the other things you normally get. You might never have them. Didn't mean you didn't have a concussion, just means it was minor. And it seems it's resolved pretty quickly. We know almost nothing about concussions in the long term, but in the short term, if you treat them properly, if you do the best practices all the way through, if you do everything stepwise the way that the NFL requires, you tend to have pretty good outcomes. You just can't predict timing. It can be absolutely quick. You can be relatively good to go the next day, though certainly the protocol doesn't allow that. But in other cases, seemingly minor concussions can last years. Mike Matheny, the manager of the Kansas City Royals, his career was ended by concussions. He still can't look up without getting dizzy. So he doesn't track fly balls. Had to teach himself not to do that. Those symptoms can last for years. And unfortunately, we've seen far too many that have resulted in dementia and death and ALS and other bad things, which is why the NFL does take it more seriously now.
The Detroit Lions are small favorites in a game for the first time since 2020. It's been like 24 games. I'm not sure this is going to hold. I think there's a chance Washington could turn into a small favorite come kickoff. We'll see. But nevertheless, a big reason for that would be Andress Swift, who returned to practice today after not practicing. He did play through this last week, and it's an ankle, I believe, right, Will?
Yeah. Simple minor ankle sprain. He played through it. They taped him back up. That's not unusual. Got back out there. Obviously, last week he had a big, shiny run. 60-something yards, and that was the bulk of his day. If you look at the rest of his day, it was pretty standard Andress Swift, 3-4 yards here, 3-4 yards there. Didn't get a lot of open space. I don't think the ankle is going to affect him at all. I was glad to see he was back at practice. So I don't think this is going to affect him. We expected more of a rotation in that backfield, sort of a role split, and I think we'll see it slide back. But I don't think it'll be entirely because of the injury. I think it's more because that one big run made it look like he was the hot hand.
This is going to be a difficult question for me to ask you about. It wasn't in our show rundown, but I'm going to spur it on you because I know you wrote about it this week, and it's because it's a difficult question because of the team that Mac Jones plays for in New England, which is very secretive about everything.
Let's stop there, right there, Stephen. They're actually not.
Really?
New England, and I am certainly no Bill Belichick defender here, but they're no worse than a lot of other teams and better than most. They are very, very vague about injuries, but they follow the letter of the law. I mean, all those years they had Tom Brady as questionable was actually what you're supposed to do when somebody does have an injury that could possibly affect their thing. I don't have as big a problem with the Patriots as a lot of people seem to, and I just don't understand it. I think it's reputation more than anything else, but with Mac Jones and that back injury, this is the simplest injury. I talk about him not having, I don't think, a flak jacket. So he should be wearing an advanced flak jacket. I can introduce him to Unequal if he'd like. But he basically got folded up. You see those guys, defenders.
Yeah, if you find the video, he got high load, man. He got crushed.
It was a nasty one. I can remember years ago, I was following up on a player who had back surgery. And one of the things I noticed was that they listed him as, I forget what the number was, but it was about 1.5 inches shorter than he had been at the combine. And I was like, this is interesting. So I called and said, did you just ask him how tall they are? He's like, no, our anesthesiologist, because football players, their height and weight, they're so dense. We have to take it very seriously to get the dosing right. So we always measure them. We get their height beforehand. We get their weight on the table. And I was like, so why did the guy shrink 1 inch? And that's pretty common with NFL players. They're hitting so hard that it compresses their spine and they get shorter. they actually expand a little bit in the off season. But over the course of a career, you can see a guy lose an inch, inch and a half. On the other hand, quarterbacks can grow by almost half an inch because they get hit from behind and get that spinal extension with such great force like Mac Jones does. It's no wonder that these guys get back spasm. And that's all this was. When your spine gets bent like that, the muscles around it seize up to protect it. And that's all that a back spasm is. If you've ever had one, you know how painful it is. You can't even move, let alone play football, which is what a lot of guys do. So I'm not terribly worried about this. Mac Jones isn't the most mobile guy to begin with. Again, get him a good rib protector, expect him to play.
Okay, last one here before we wrap up. We saved it for last because it doesn't affect the line this week. We already know he's out. It's Dak Prescott from the Dallas Cowboys. But the interesting note here, Will, is that they did not put him on IR.
Yeah.
Is that actually realistic that he could be back in less than the mandatory 4 weeks?
Yeah, I think it's going to be week 5. I detailed this in my column this week, but let me show you what they did. Basically, they took this outside edge of his thumb. You'll see it noted as the lateral side because anatomic position is with laying down like you're a dead guy with your palms up. So it gets very confusing. But here on this edge of the thumb, away from where he would grip a ball, they put in a plate. Instead of just pinning and screwing through the bone, they put a titanium plate that's going to hold it. Think back a couple years ago when Aaron Rodgers did this with his collarbone, was able to come back in 7 weeks. The bone is not going to heal any faster. It's just going to be very, very stable and have the protection of that plate after he comes back. So he's going to come back with a fractured thumb. What's going to happen is, can he keep the mobility and the function in that thumb? Is it going to be there in a couple weeks? It's going to take a couple weeks just for the stitches to heal. Can't let him on the field before that. But after that, at what point is he going to be functional? Forget healing. They've essentially taken that out of the equation, and Prescott would have had to, give his consent to this and understood the plan. Some really good doctors down there in Dallas. So I think this is going to be interesting. What we're looking for is probably going into week 4's practice right after the third game, whether he's out there throwing. Because the first time you see him throw, I think he'll be back that week.
Will, what I'm hearing is that bone is still going to be broken, but he's going to have some type of apparatus in there to stabilize it so he can at least throw a football.
It's just a plate.
How effective can he be doing that? I mean, is this a pain tolerance thing? Is there going to be certain throws he's not going to be able to make?
No. He's going to be able to do all or nothing. This is going to come down to function. Can he grip the ball? The thumb obviously is for grip. It's not as much for directing. It's not like getting a blister on your index finger if you're a pitcher. Every pitch comes off that. It's still coming off your fingers when you throw. So this for him is more an issue of function. Pain, He said it didn't hurt that much. He thought he had jammed it. When you come back from bone, any sort of fracture, it takes a while for the body to get all that calcium, to matrix it back up. And we just don't have any way of doing it. I'm sure you can remember, Stephen, back when you were in high school, college, a lot of people would break something and they put those bone stimulators on them. You remember those?
I think so, yeah. I didn't break
many bones.
They
don't work.
Yeah, I think I remember.
It was a matter of days. An insurance company said, nix to that because we don't want to pay for it. But when you come back from having a fractured bone, if you've never had one, they'll tell you, okay, now the fracture itself is stitching up. You can see it healing. It's not 100% healed when most players come back. In the NFL, they do it when it's stable, when they're comfortable with it, when they're sure it's not going to happen again. With this, he's actually going to be a little safer, and it comes down to function.
Last question on this. What if he hits his hand on a defensive lineman's hand or a helmet?
He's actually a little bit safer because it's still going to hurt, but he's got a titanium plate holding everything together. Okay. So, imagine having one titanium finger. For as long as that plate's in there. They won't leave this in there permanently. They'll probably take it out at the end of the season. But that's going to be titanium strong rather than just bone strong.
All right. Love it. Fantastic insight, Will. Really appreciate it. Again, The Science of Football is available wherever books are sold right now. Go check it out. It is Will's 4th book. And for a full breakdown of the injury report this week with Will's thoughts, context, a lot of players we didn't have time to talk about here, but it's all in his column at thelines.com right now. If you're watching us on YouTube, be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Let us know in the comments who you're betting on this week, what injuries concern you the most, and best of luck in week 3 of the National Football League. Week 3. I'm ahead. Week 2. Best of luck in week 2. All right. Goodbye, everybody.